a lonely rancher discovered an Apache girl shackled in his barn, then freed the pain in his own heart. The early morning sun stretched across the dusty plains of Arizona, painting the horizon in hues of amber and gold. Jack Harmon, a weathered rancher with 48 years of hard living etched into his face, pulled his worn hat lower as he trudged toward his barn. 5 years of solitude had followed him since Sarah's passing. 5 years of silent meals and empty conversations with the desert wind. His ranch sat on the outskirts of Copper Springs, nestled against the foothills where Apache territory had once flourished. Now it was just 200 acres of struggling cattle operation, surviving on Jack's stubborn will alone. "Easy girl," Jack murmured to his mare as she nickered nervously at the barn entrance. Something was different this morning. The air felt charged, unsettled. Jack pushed open the heavy wooden door, the familiar scent of hay and leather giving way to something unfamiliar. His calloused hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt as he squinted into the shadowy corners. A sound, barely perceptible, drew his attention to the back stall, the shuffle of movement, then stillness. "Who's there?" His voice echoed against the wooden beams. "I'm armed, and the sheriff's just a phone call away." When no answer came, Jack moved cautiously forward, lantern raised. What he discovered stopped him cold. Huddled in the corner, bound with frayed rope that had cut into her wrists, was a young Native American woman. Her dark eyes, wide with fear and defiance, locked onto his. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her clothes were torn, her face smudged with dirt and marked with bruises. "Apache," Jack guessed, from the traditional elements of her clothing that remained intact. "Jesus Christ," Jack whispered, lowering his lantern. The woman flinched away as he approached, pressing herself against the wooden slats. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jack said, setting the lantern down carefully. "Who did this to you?" She said nothing, her gaze unwavering but filled with distrust. Jack pulled out his knife, and the woman's eyes widened further. "To cut the ropes," he explained, pointing to her bound wrists. "Just to free you." As Jack carefully sliced through the bindings, he noticed the tattoo on her forearm, traditional Apache symbols that reminded him of designs he'd seen on the reservation. The rope fell away, revealing raw, bleeding skin beneath. "My name is Jack," he said slowly. "Jack Harmon. This is my ranch." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then, barely audible, "Nisha, Nisha," Jack repeated. "Who did this to you?" She rubbed her wrists, wincing. "Men, 3. They take me from the reservation road." Her English was accented but clear. "They talk about selling." Jack's stomach clenched. Human trafficking. He'd heard rumors about operations targeting vulnerable women from the reservations, but it had always seemed like a distant problem, not something that would land literally in his own backyard. "How did you end up here?" "I fight. In their truck. They hit me, but I jump." Her eyes flashed with fierce pride. "They search, but cannot find in dark. I hide here." Jack nodded slowly, respect building for the young woman's courage. "You're safe now. Those men won't find you here." He extended his hand hesitantly. "Let's get you to the house. You need water, food, and I've got a first aid kit for those wrists." Nisha regarded his hand for a long moment before accepting it. As they stepped out into the morning light, Jack felt something shift inside him, a door long closed, creaking open, just a fraction. What neither of them knew was that the men who had taken Nisha weren't the type to give up easily, and they had seen Jack's ranch in the distance when they were searching in the night. The story of the lonely rancher and the Apache woman he discovered was just beginning, a tale that would test them both in ways they couldn't imagine, and perhaps heal wounds far deeper than the visible ones on Nisha's wrists. Don't miss what happens next. This is just the beginning of Jack and Nisha's powerful journey. Subscribe now to our channel and hit that notification bell to discover how their lives become forever intertwined as danger closes in. You won't want to miss a single moment of this gripping tale of courage, healing, and unexpected connection. Subscribe today and join thousands of others who can't wait to see Chapter 2. Jack's ranch house stood as a testament to faded dreams, a modest two-bedroom structure with a wraparound porch that Sarah had once filled with potted geraniums. Now only empty clay pots remained, gathering dust and memories. Inside, Nisha sat rigidly at the kitchen table, her eyes constantly darting to the windows and door. The first aid kit lay open beside a bowl of warm water as Jack carefully cleaned the raw wounds on her wrists. "These need antibiotic ointment," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. Years of tending injured livestock had made his hands surprisingly delicate when needed. How long were you tied up?" "2 days," Nisha replied, wincing as the cloth touched a particularly deep abrasion. "They catch me walking from my grandmother's house to the main road. No one sees." Jack nodded, applying the ointment with methodical care. "Your family must be worried sick." A shadow passed over Nisha's face. "No family to worry. Grandmother died last month. I live alone now." The simple statement hung in the air between them, a recognition of shared solitude that needed no further explanation. "I'm sorry," Jack said, and meant it. As he wrapped clean gauze around her wrists, Jack noticed the intricate tattoo again. "That's beautiful work," he commented, nodding toward the design. Nisha's expression softened slightly. "My grandmother was tattoo artist, traditional way, with cactus needle and charcoal. This design tells our family story, protection from evil, guidance through darkness." "Seems like it might have worked," Jack observed. The ghost of a smile touched Nisha's lips, then faded as quickly as it had appeared. After finishing with her wrists, Jack heated some leftover stew on the stove, venison with vegetables from his small garden. As Nisha ate, her movements gradually became less guarded, though her eyes still checked the windows at every small sound. "We should call the tribal police," Jack said, pouring her more water, "and the county sheriff. Report what happened." Nisha set down her spoon, her expression hardening. "Police do nothing. Not first-time girls disappear. Some found, some not. Reports filed, forgotten. These men need to be stopped," Jack insisted. "With what proof?" Nisha challenged. "My word against theirs. I have no, how you say, standing in white man's court." The bitter truth in her words stung, because Jack knew she wasn't entirely wrong. The justice system had never served native communities well. Still, he pulled out his seldom-used cell phone. "I know Sheriff Dawson personally, went to school with him. He's a good man." He hesitated, then added, "But it's your choice. I won't force you." Nisha studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the weight of his character. Finally, she nodded once. While waiting for the sheriff, Jack showed Nisha to the spare bedroom, untouched since Sarah's sister had visited 3 years ago. "You can stay as long as you need," he said awkwardly, standing in the doorway. "It's not much, but it's safe." "Thank you," Nisha said simply, but the words carried genuine gratitude. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Mike Dawson's patrol car kicked up dust as it rolled down the long driveway. Jack watched from the porch as the familiar figure emerged, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone comfortable with authority. "Jack," he greeted with a nod. "Been a while." "Mike," Jack returned. "Wish it were under better circumstances." Inside, Nisha told her story with quiet dignity, answering the sheriff's questions directly. She described the men, 2 white, 1 Hispanic, and their truck, a dark blue pickup with a dented rear fender. "We've had reports of similar incidents near Window Rock," Dawson said, writing in his notebook. "Might be connected to a trafficking ring operating out of Phoenix. I'll coordinate with the tribal police." As the sheriff prepared to leave, he pulled Jack aside on the porch. "You're taking a risk getting involved, Jack. These aren't just some local troublemakers. What was I supposed to do? Turn her away? No, Dawson sighed. You did right, but watch your back. And here. He handed Jack a small card. My personal cell. Any sign of trouble, you call immediately. After the sheriff left, an uneasy silence settled over the ranch. Jack busied himself with evening chores, checking and double-checking the locks on the barn and house, something he hadn't bothered with in years. That night, as darkness blanketed the land, Jack sat on the porch with his father's old shotgun across his lap. The stars stretched endlessly above, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath their cold light. Inside, Nisha slept fitfully in the spare room, her dreams haunted by rough hands and the suffocating darkness of a truck bed. But for the first time in days, she slept knowing someone was watching over her, a stranger who had, for reasons she didn't yet understand, chosen to help when others might have looked away. Miles down the road, in a roadside motel with peeling paint and flickering neon, 3 men gathered around a table littered with beer bottles. A local news report played quietly on the ancient television, something about increased patrols due to reported abductions. Would we need to find her? The oldest of the 3 said, his voice cold with calculation rather than anger. She can identify us. That ranch was the only place she could have reached on foot, the second man replied. We should check it out. The third man, younger than the others, looked uncertain. Maybe we should just move on. Find another girl. Too risky now. The leader fixed him with a stare that ended all discussion. No loose ends. We go tomorrow night. The die was cast. As Jack and Nisha found tentative peace under the same roof, forces were already in motion that would shatter that fragile sanctuary. The morning brought a tentative routine. Jack rose before dawn, as he had for decades, and found Nisha already awake in the kitchen, attempting to start the ancient coffee maker. Sorry, she said quickly. I wanted to help. Jack showed her how to work the temperamental machine, explaining its quirks with the awkward patience of someone unaccustomed to teaching. The domesticity of the moment struck him as surreal. It had been years since he'd shared morning coffee with anyone. Over breakfast, Nisha asked, You have family pictures, but no family. Why? Jack followed her gaze to the photographs lining the living room wall, faded images of happier times. Sarah laughing by the creek, their wedding day, both looking impossibly young, the ranch when it had been thriving, cattle dotting the fields like mobile shadows. Had a wife. Sarah, cancer took her 5 years ago. He spoke matter-of-factly, the way men of his generation discussed tragedy, acknowledging without indulging emotion. No kids. Tried, but never happened for us. Nisha nodded, understanding in her eyes. My people say the greatest pain is a future that never comes to be. Jack looked at her sharply, surprised by the wisdom in the observation. Your English is very good. College educated, 2 years at Northern Arizona University, studying nursing. Had to leave when grandmother got sick. Her expression grew distant. Was going to return this fall. The revelation reshaped Jack's perception of her. Not just a victim, but a young woman with ambitions and interrupted dreams, a life forcibly detoured. You still can, he said, when this is all over. Nisha offered a non-committal shrug that spoke volumes about her uncertainty regarding the future. Later that morning, Jack showed Nisha around the ranch, the struggling cattle herd, the small vegetable garden, the workshop where he repaired equipment. She listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed her quick intelligence. At the corral, his chestnut mare whickered softly as they approached. This is Penny, Jack said, running a weathered hand along the horse's neck. Best cutting horse I ever had, though she's mostly retired now. Nisha approached cautiously, hand extended. The mare sniffed her fingers, then nudged against her palm. She likes you, Jack observed, surprised. Penny was typically standoffish with strangers. Animals know who means harm and who doesn't, Nisha said, gently stroking the mare's muzzle. Like people should, but forget how. Around midday, Sheriff Dawson called with an update. Jack put the phone on speaker so Nisha could hear. "We've got an APB out on the truck you described," Dawson reported. "And I've been in touch with the tribal police. They've had 3 similar abductions in the past 2 months. All young women, all taken from isolated areas." "Any leads?" Jack asked. "Nothing solid yet, but we're checking known trafficking operations with connections to Phoenix." A pause. "I've arranged extra patrols near your area, Jack, but I can't station someone there permanently." "We'll be careful," Jack assured him. After the call ended, a heavy silence fell between them, the reality of their situation weighing more heavily than before. That afternoon, Jack taught Nisha to shoot. They stood behind the barn, away from the road, with tin cans arranged on fence posts. "My father's revolver," Jack explained, showing her the .38 special, simple, reliable, 6 shots. Nisha held the weapon with respectful caution. "I have shot rifles before, for hunting, never handgun. Different feel, but same principles." Jack guided her stance, her grip. "Breathe out as you squeeze the trigger. Don't pull." Her first shot went wide. The second clipped a can. By the 6th, she was hitting more than missing. "Good enough to make someone think twice," Jack nodded with approval. "Keep it with you." He handed her a small box of ammunition, just in case. As the sun began its descent, they prepared dinner together, a simple meal of beans, rice, and the last of the venison. The domesticity felt strangely natural, as if they'd established their rhythm days ago rather than hours. Over dinner, Jack asked about her tattoo again, genuinely curious about its meaning. Nisha traced the pattern with her finger. "Each symbol tells part of our family story. This one represents the mountains where my ancestors lived. This is for protection. This small spiral means continuation. Life goes on, no matter what is lost." "Your grandmother taught you all this?" Nisha nodded. "She kept the old ways. Said without them, we become ghosts in our own land." Her eyes grew distant. "She wanted to give me this final tattoo before I returned to university, but time ran out." "I'm sorry," Jack said simply. "What about yours?" Nisha nodded toward the faded blue ink visible on Jack's forearm when he rolled up his sleeve. "Army, 75th Rangers, long time ago." He rarely spoke of his military service, those years in Afghanistan that had changed him in ways Sarah had eventually learned to accommodate. "You were a warrior," Nisha observed. "I was a soldier," Jack corrected. "Not the same thing. In Apache tradition, they are not so different. Both must know when to fight and when to wait, when to act and when to be still." Jack considered this. "Guess we'll need both skills before this is over." As night descended, they secured the house, checking locks, drawing curtains. Jack kept the shotgun within reach, and Nisha the revolver. They were as prepared as they could be, yet the feeling of vulnerability remained. A remote ranch house, miles from neighbors, with only 2 people to defend it. What neither of them discussed was the growing connection between them. Not romantic, but something equally powerful. A bridge built of shared solitude and mutual respect, spanning the vast differences in their ages, backgrounds, and experiences. In the darkest hour of night, Jack sat at the kitchen table, unable to sleep. Through the window, he watched the moonlight cast silver shadows across his land. For the first time in years, he found himself praying, not with words or to any specific deity, but with the silent intensity of a man with something to lose. Outside, beyond the reach of the ranch house lights, a dark blue pickup truck rolled slowly past, headlights extinguished. Dawn broke with oppressive heat, the sky a harsh, cloudless blue that promised no relief. Jack rose from his vigil at the kitchen table, muscles stiff from the hours of stillness. Coffee made, he stepped onto the porch and immediately tensed. Tire tracks in the dirt road, fresh ones that hadn't been there yesterday. Nisha joined him, instantly alert to his concern. "What is it?" "Someone drove by in the night. Didn't stop, but they were here." Jack pointed to the tracks, clearly visible in the morning light. They shared a look of understanding. Their sanctuary had been discovered. Over breakfast, they formulated a plan. Jack would drive into town, alert Sheriff Dawson in person, and gather supplies. Nisha would remain at the ranch, armed and vigilant. "I don't like leaving you alone," Jack admitted, checking the revolver once more before handing it to her. "I survived 2 days bound in the back of a truck," Nisha reminded him, her voice steady. "I can handle a few hours watching a house." Jack recognized the steel beneath her calm exterior, the same resilience that had kept her fighting when others might have surrendered to despair. "Keep the doors locked. Stay away from windows. Anyone approaches. You hide in the root cellar. Entrance is under the rug in the pantry. Call Dawson, then me." Nisha nodded, memorizing the instructions. As Jack prepared to leave, she surprised him by touching his arm lightly. Be careful. These men, they have dead eyes." The simple observation chilled him more than any elaborate warning could have. Jack's battered pickup raised dust clouds as he drove the 20 miles into Copper Springs, a town that had once thrived on nearby mining operations, but now survived mainly on tourism and nostalgia. The main street was lined with Western-themed storefronts, catering to visitors seeking an authentic experience. At the sheriff's office, a young deputy informed him that Dawson was out investigating a disturbance at the reservation border. Jack left a detailed message, then headed to the general store for supplies. As he loaded bottled water, canned goods, and ammunition into his cart, Jack noticed 2 men by the register, watching him with calculated casualness. One wore a faded denim jacket despite the heat. The other, younger and nervous-looking, kept fingering something in his pocket. Jack continued shopping, his senses heightened. When he approached the counter, the men had disappeared. Outside, Jack loaded his purchases into the truck bed, constantly scanning his surroundings. As he climbed into the cab, he glimpsed a dark blue pickup with a dented rear fender parked at the far end of the lot. His blood ran cold. They weren't just watching the ranch. They were tracking him, perhaps hoping he would lead them back to Nisha. Jack started his engine and pulled onto the main road, immediately taking a detour down a side street. In his rearview mirror, he saw the blue pickup follow. "Damn it!" he muttered, reaching for his cell phone. No service, the curse of rural Arizona's dead zones. For the next 20 minutes, Jack led his pursuers through a series of back roads and dirt tracks, utilizing his intimate knowledge of the area to stay ahead. Finally, he navigated a treacherous wash that his high-clearance truck could handle, but their lower vehicle couldn't. As they bottomed out behind him, Jack accelerated, putting crucial distance between them. By the time he reached the ranch, dust-covered and tense, the afternoon was waning. Nisha opened the door at his approach, revolver ready. "They found me in town," Jack explained breathlessly, helping her barricade the door. "2 of them, driving the truck you described. The 3rd must be watching the ranch," Nisha concluded grimly. They moved quickly, implementing the security measures they'd discussed, bringing the horses into the barn, securing outbuildings, establishing lines of sight. Jack tried calling Sheriff Dawson again, this time reaching him. "They're here, Mike. 3 of them, coordinated. We're barricaded at the ranch." "On my way," Dawson promised. "But it'll take time to gather enough deputies, 30 minutes minimum." "We'll hold," Jack said, with more confidence than he felt. As dusk approached, the ranch took on the atmosphere of a fortress under siege. Jack and Nisha positioned themselves strategically, he with the shotgun covering the front approach, she with the revolver watching the rear. "In my culture," Nisha said quietly, "we believe that how a person faces death reveals their true spirit." Jack glanced at her. "Nobody's dying today." "Perhaps not," she acknowledged. "But if we do, I am glad it is fighting rather than as a victim." The simple dignity in her statement moved Jack deeply. This young woman, who had every reason to collapse under the trauma she'd endured, stood resolute beside him, a warrior in the truest sense. As darkness fell, they maintained their vigil in silence, each lost in private thoughts. For Jack, memories surfaced unbidden. of Sarah, of his military service, of the solitary years that had hollowed him out. He realized with sudden clarity that in just 3 days, Nisha had awakened something he'd thought long dead. Purpose. The distant rumble of engines broke the silence. Headlights appeared on the access road, then cut out about a quarter mile from the house. "They're here," Jack said unnecessarily, moving to his designated position. Nisha took a deep breath, centered herself. "Remember what you taught me. Breathe out as you squeeze." Jack nodded, oddly comforted by having his own instructions repeated back to him. The wait was excruciating, minutes stretching into what felt like hours as they strained to detect movement in the darkness. Finally, a flicker of motion near the barn, then another by the workshop. "They're surrounding us," Jack whispered, trying to cut off escape routes. Through the kitchen window, Nisha spotted a shadow moving toward the back door. She raised the revolver, aimed carefully as the figure drew closer. At the same moment, the front door shuddered under a powerful kick. Jack fired the shotgun through the wood, rewarded by a cry of pain and cursing. All pretense of stealth abandoned, the attackers converged on the house. A window shattered in the living room. The back door splintered under repeated blows. Jack and Nisha retreated to the hallway, the most defensible position with sightlines to both entrances. Back to back, they prepared for the final confrontation. "Whatever happens," Jack said over his shoulder, "you gave me back something important. Thank you." "As did you," Nisha replied, her voice steady despite everything. The doors gave way simultaneously. Shadowy figures rushed in, weapons raised. What happened next would later seem like a blur to both Jack and Nisha, a chaos of gunfire, shouting, and desperate movement. Jack's military training resurfaced in the crisis, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. Nisha fought with the fierce determination that had kept her alive thus far. When it was over, one attacker lay dead in the living room. Another wounded and subdued in the kitchen. The third had fled into the night. And in the distance, finally, the welcome sound of sirens approaching. The aftermath unfolded like scenes from a distant film. Sheriff's deputies securing the property, paramedics tending to wounds, statements given and evidence collected. Jack insisted on being treated at the scene rather than going to the hospital, despite the graze wound on his upper arm. Nisha escaped physical injury, but sat wrapped in a shock blanket, her gaze far away. Sheriff Dawson approached them as the chaos began to subside. The wounded ones talking, part of a trafficking ring operating between Arizona and Nevada. They've been targeting women from the reservations for months. "The third man," Jack asked, "found him trying to steal a car in town. He's in custody." Dawson's expression was grim but satisfied. "You two just helped break open a case that spans 3 states. As dawn broke over the damaged ranch house, officials finally departed, leaving Jack and Nisha alone amid the wreckage of the previous night. Broken glass crunched underfoot as they surveyed the damage. Shattered windows, splintered doors, bullet holes in walls. "I can fix all this," Jack said, more to himself than to Nisha. "Might take time, but it's just wood and glass." Nisha stood in the center of the living room, looking strangely lost now that the immediate danger had passed. What happens now? It was the question hanging between them, the acknowledgement that their paths, so unexpectedly intertwined, must eventually diverge. "You're free," Jack said simply. "Free to go back to your life, your plans. Sheriff says they'll need your testimony eventually, but that could be months away." Nisha nodded slowly, absorbing this. "And you? Back to your solitude?" The question struck deeper than she could know. Jack looked around the ranch house, at the faded photographs, the worn furniture, the empty spaces that had defined his existence for 5 long years. "I don't know," he admitted. "Seems different now, somehow." In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm of restoration, repairing the house, tending to neglected chores, gradually reclaiming the space from violence. Jack found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years, about Sarah, about his time in the service, about the ranch when it had thrived. Nisha, in turn, spoke of her grandmother, of tribal traditions being lost, of her interrupted education and uncertain future. One evening, as they sat on the partially repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors, Nisha made an announcement. "I called the university today. I can return for the full semester if I pass the entrance exams again." Jack felt a complicated mix of emotions, pride, happiness, and an unexpected hollowness. "That's wonderful. You should definitely go. The campus is only 2 hours away," she added, not looking at him. "Close enough to visit on weekends." If I had somewhere to visit. The offer hung in the air between them, not a declaration of romantic intent, but something perhaps more profound, a refusal to return to isolation, a recognition of the healing they had found in each other's company. "This old place could use a regular visitor," Jack said carefully, "especially one who knows how to work the coffee maker." Nisha smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. "The coffee maker is temperamental. Needs someone who understands its moods." "Like most worthwhile things," Jack agreed. 2 weeks after the attack, they stood together in the repaired barn. Jack had been teaching Nisha about ranch operations, and she had proven a quick study. Today, however, was different. "My grandmother would have wanted to finish this," Nisha explained, laying out the implements. A sterilized needle, natural charcoal ink, clean cloths. Jack looked at the small design she had drawn. A simple spiral, surrounded by protective symbols. "You're sure about this?" "In our tradition, tattoos mark important transitions," she said. "This one represents survival and new beginnings." She held up the sketch. "It combines elements of my family pattern with symbols of this land. Your land. Where I found safety, our land," Jack corrected quietly. "Aye, for as long as you want it to be." The process was slow, methodical and intimate in its trust. As Nisha worked the traditional design into the skin of Jack's forearm, just below his faded military tattoo, neither felt the need to fill the silence with words. When it was finished, Jack studied the marking with solemn appreciation. "What does this specific pattern mean?" "It means protector," Nisha explained. But also protected. In Apache thinking, these are not separate states but part of the same circle. Jack nodded, understanding flowing between them that transcended language or cultural differences. They had each, in their own way, saved the other, not just from external threats, but from the prison of isolation that had been closing in around them both. The next day, Nisha packed a small bag for her journey to the university testing center. Jack would drive her, wait while she took the exams, then bring her back to the ranch until the semester began. As they stood by his truck, the vast Arizona sky stretching endlessly above them, Jack gestured to the land around them. "Whatever happens, you always have a place here. A home." Nisha touched the bandage covering her newly completed family tattoo, the one her grandmother had never had the chance to finish, the one that now incorporated symbols of her new connection to this land and the man before her. "I know," she said simply. And in those 2 words lay everything. Acknowledgement of the past they had survived, appreciation of the present they had built, and hope for the future they would create, each in their own way, but no longer alone. As they drove away from the ranch, dust rising behind them like earthen memories, neither looked back. They didn't need to. What mattered most traveled with them, carried in the resilience of 2 hearts that had found, in the most unlikely circumstances, a path back to life.